previous time, we were actually speaking about belligerent powers of book Revelation. And we just started speaking, and we talked about general on our side, Messiah, who leads the army on our army, and general on another side, who is Satan or dragon. We talked also about 7 spirits, which are spirits of God. And we talked about fallen star, which is just another symbolic description of Satan, who was fallen from heaven to earth. And now, when I was considering it, that we proceed now from that point, continuing studying belligerent powers of Revelation, we'll study 7 churches and some other powers, which are mostly human. And I understood that we first should study and see different perception of time in Bible. Why now? Because, well, before we were studying those powers which are not historic. I would tell they are above history or above time. Definitely God, he is above and beyond time because he created time. And Satan, he just very long living, so he just lives throughout whole history of mankind. But now we'll speak about certain powers which it seems like they appear and disappear because people come and go, people die, but Bible shows it as systems or organizations or people who always persist in time from past to present and to future. And why it is so? How can it be? Because how time is seen in Bible is very different from how time is seen by Western people in Western mentality. So in order to continue, let us first check the time concept in Bible. Do you remember when Solomon was writing in book Ecclesiastes, chapter 9, verses 9 and 10, the thing that has been, it is that which shall be. And that which is done is that which shall be done. And there is no new thing under the sun. Is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new. It has been already of all time, which was before us. Well, we could think that Solomon tells that things repeat. This is how people usually tell that history repeats itself, or history is like a helix, and things which happen now, they are similar to things which happened in previous time. But that's not what Solomon means here, because Solomon speaks from perspective of biblical understanding of time, which is more Semitic, I would tell, or Middle Eastern understanding of time, which is very different from Greek. Now, what is Greek understanding of time? Ancient philosopher Heraclitus, Greek philosopher, he described it very well when he was telling that a person cannot enter a river 2 times. Why? Because the river is flowing, the river flows, so if you come to the river 2nd time, it's already not the same river which was 1st time, because the water passed. So it is already a different river. And that is a perspective of time in eyes of Heraclitus and all Western people, or almost all Western people. The time constantly changes. And even better illustration, not known to Heraclitus, will be a film, a movie film with frames, which you see here on the picture. What is it? It's like different frames, and at every moment of time, you see one frame. Then next second, you see another frame. Next second, you see another frame. And whenever frame shifts, you don't have access already to the frame which disappeared. It is in past. And you don't see the frame which is in future. So it's kind of every time you see only one frame, and one frame is always isolated from surrounding ones. That is a Western perspective of time. That's why when we study history, we study it as a sequence of events, and although events have causal connection between themselves, we still see it as one thing is replaced by another thing. What people usually tell about history developing as helix, and what people tend to see in the saying of Solomon in Ecclesiastes, which we just have read, that the thing which has been, it is that which shall be. People usually tell that it's repeating. That repeating is a cyclical time going in cycle, repeating, but that is not biblical understanding also. That is a concept of Hinduism. In Hinduism, the universe is in great cycle of creation and destruction. And there are Buddhas for every era, but history literally repeats always. That's why even dead souls of people, they go and they then have next life as a different creature, etc. So it's a Hinduistic, it's completely non-biblical understanding of also cycle. Biblical understanding is that time grows and develops, or actually everything grows and develops in time, and time is better presented not by cycles, not by movie film like here, but like a tree, I will tell, or branches of tree, how branches grow, and out of big branch grows a smaller one, and then a next, but you cannot tell next because it's kind of the same branch, and in the very small branch and the very end, you can see fibers, and those fibers are coming from a bigger branch, and those fibers are coming from the stem and from the root, and the fiber which is in the root, it prolongs, and its continuation goes throughout all branches up to the end. And next moment of time, you'll tell that the branches continue growing and branching further, and you see next new things which are just development of what was previously. That's what Solomon's speaking about. He tells that things which are now, they were previously really not something similar to them. They did exist in the beginning, like in past times, but they were like embryos or germs, or seeds of it, and then they come and they exist now, and they will not disappear. It's because they continue, they just change their form, and their behavior, and they continue existing in the future. Nothing disappears, and nothing happens from like isolated on a movie frame, but it's continuous development of everything. That's what is even seen in the Hebrew language grammatically, because Hebrew language grammatically does not have past, present, and future distinction of time. Like all European languages have, most languages have even more different construction of time, but it all can be divided into past, present, and future. The Hebrew language has only two aspects, imperfect and perfect, something which was done and something which is not done. But there is no past, present, and future. If you study Hebrew, especially biblical Hebrew, Hebrew of Bible, because in modern Hebrew language, they already started kind of to create that construction, because it's being dictated by cross-pollination between cultures. But that's how it was in biblical English language. We see that understanding of time, because it's different, it's even different understanding of generation, because Bible sees forefathers or ancestors in their children, and it sees children in their ancestors. Bible doesn't put clear distinctions, because a family, a clan, or a person, he exists throughout whole time by just children being a continuation of their forefathers, just like branches of the tree here. So the understanding of time and understanding of generation, they're very near, very aligned to each other. We can see it in Bible in many places. So now when I kind of show the big picture of it, let us go into some examples of Bible, and we will see something in Bible which clearly illustrates it. For example, in book of Deuteronomy, when children of Israel are standing before entering the land of Canaan, after the 40 years pass, etc., God tells to them, the Lord made not this covenant with our fathers, but with us who all of us here alive this day. The Lord taken with you, the Lord talked with you face to face in the mount out of the midst of fire. Well, the point is that actually the Lord talked to their fathers, not to them. 40 years ago, their fathers were standing before mountain and God talked to them. But now God tells that it was talked to those people. And he tells that I talk to you to face. So why? Because those children, they existed in the loins of their fathers. So God does not make distinction. Let us see other examples. For example, in the book of Judges, we see an interesting dialogue. And Judah said to Shimeon, his brother, I read Judges 1:3. Judah said unto Shimeon, his brother, come up with me into my lot, that we may fight against the Canaanites. And I likewise will go with thee into thy lot. So Shimeon went with him. Two brothers are speaking, but well, actually two brothers are already 5,000 years, even more than half, like 700 years are dead. But this is conversation between two tribes, but it is described as conversation between Judah and Shimeon, between two brothers. Why? Because those people do continue in their descendants. It's not just figurative language. It's really is like grammatical construction here in Judges 1:3 is a really conversation of two people. When we start understanding it, how God sees ancestors, descendants connected to each other, not through casuality, not just genetical connection, but it's kind of one, like oneness, it's together. We can see many things in the Bible much more clear. For example, we can now see why Messiah, why Christ comes through the tribe of Judah. We see that it is even from Genesis. There is something which Judah does in Genesis, which makes probably God to choose him. In Genesis 44, you remember when Joseph was in Egypt and Joseph was kind of punishing or making an experiment, checking his brothers, and there was a issue with Benjamin that he told that Benjamin stole a cup, precious cup, from Joseph's house, and it was kind of decided that Benjamin had to stay in slavery because of this. That was made up by Joseph to check his brothers. And Judah speaks to Joseph at that moment. And Judah asks him to leave Benjamin to return to his father. And he tells in Genesis 44:33, now therefore I pray thee, let thy servant abide instead of the lad a bondman to my Lord, and let the lad go up with his brethren. He tells that I will be a slave, I will stay here in slavery, I sacrifice my life for this guy, younger guy, who is Benjamin, because my father waits for him. My father wants to see him. This is exactly a model what Jesus did when he sacrificed his life for Adam, for descendants of Adam, for all us, mankind, because Father waits for us, because Father wants to see us. So Judah now makes kind of the same. It's a symbol of what Jesus did. And we see that connection. That's why Judah is ancestor, earthly ancestor of Jesus. Even clearer illustration is described by Paul in a book of Hebrews. In chapter 7 of Hebrews, we read a verse which sounds strange for European ear, for Western people. Hebrews 7 verses 9 to 10 speaks about tithes and about Melchizedek. And it tells, and as I may say, Levi also, who receives tithes, paid tithes in Abraham, for he was yet in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. Well, Apostle refers to the episode in history when Abraham met Melchizedek, and Abraham brought tithe, 1/10 of what he earned in the war, to Melchizedek. And Apostle tells that it was Levi also who gave tithe to Melchizedek. Where was Levi? Levi was not born yet, technically, but he was in loins of Abraham. Even Abraham, even not being his father, but his great-grandfather, right? So biblical understanding is that it doesn't matter that Levi did not do it himself. Levi was in loins of Abraham. Abraham did it. It means that Levi also did it. That's why you understand, that's why we all sinned in Adam, how Paul writes in different ways. Yeah, we were not there in the Garden of Eden, but we were in loins of Adam. We are his descendants. He did it, so we also did it. That's how universe is structured. God shows in the Bible in many places. We'll continue now to more examples, but Western understanding is more following the Greek understanding. And Greek understanding was everything is separate things, and you cannot just enter a river 2 times. Things change, and every situation is completely separated from what was before, what will be after, like frames of the film. Bible shows us a different picture. Look how Luke, who writes gospel in from European point of view, in European mentality, how differently he starts gospel from Matthew. Matthew writes it from Jewish mentality. In Luke 3:1, we read something which is very important for Western people. When history is described, the question is when exactly it is. In Luke 3:1, it's written, in 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, Pontius Pilate being governor of Judea, Herod being tetrarch of Galilee, etc., etc., etc. Luke, being a Western person, at least by his way of writing, possibly even by his way of thinking to some extent, he describes it in Western way. He pinpoints a time. Well, Hebrew mentality is completely different. How does Matthew start from the very beginning, from the very first verse of Matthew's gospel? He tells, book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. He starts it by just connecting Jesus to his ancestors, because it's not exact timing which is important. Important is where it comes from, this branch, where it grows from which stem, from which root. So for biblical mentality, it's all time, it's kind of one object, one system, and that's what is important. That's why for Matthew, it's more important to show connection of Jesus to Abraham, to David, to show that it is fulfillment of prophecy, and to show that in Jesus is a continuation of the promised line of Messiah. By the way, this understanding of a person as a link in a long chain, as continuation, it is nowadays seen, in old times also, it was seen in all Semitic languages how they named people. Nowadays, Arab people also name themselves the same way, and in old times, and in Hebrew also in old times. Do you remember in Matthew 1 how it was like son of him, son of him, son of him, like all continuation? If we take Arab names, that's how they usually go. Yes, like I showed here in this document, for example, a name of a famous physician and scientist of 11th century, which is called in European languages Avicenna. And his name is just written as Abu Ali al-Hussein ibn Abdullah ibn al-Hassan ibn Ali ibn Sina. What does it mean? It means, Abu means a father, actually. It means father of Ali al-Hussein, son of Abdullah, son of Hassan, son of Ali, son of Sina. It means that those several names, his proper name is Hussein. After that go several names of his forefathers, but before it even goes the name of his son. So proper name of a person is kind of a between his son and his father, his grandfather, great-grandfather. So a person is not by himself. It's not isolated island. He is a chain in a long link. That's how Bible sees people. And the same happens with time, and the same happens with events, which we'll study in Book of Revelation. It's not isolated events. That's why Book of Revelation does not look like a history school book, where we see event, another event, another event, and we know that one event ends, another event starts. It's not the same way in Book Revelation. That's why it's difficult to understand from European perspective. Yeah, we told that all of us, we sinned in Adam, yes? That's how Bible sees, because we existed in the loins of Adam. And in Romans 5:19, actually, Paul continues, for as by one man's disobedience, many were made sinners, so by the obedience of one shall many be made righteous. So as we all sinned in Adam, we're kind of on that root, yes, that root of the tree, and that's the root which got the disease of sin. So when we are branches on that root of Adam, which has disease of sin, we are also affected. What God wants to do, he has another root and another stem growing from that root, which he made in Jesus, and he wants to transfer us, disconnect our branches from sick plant and connect to the healthy, to Jesus. And even Adam also will be transferred the same way. So that's why we can all be righteous as Jesus. If just like we are continuation of Adam, if we become continuation of Jesus, his descendants, spiritually speaking. Yes, very interesting how time, well, when we speak about time going as fibers in branches, I like this illustration because it actually helps to understand very well how sometimes the same fiber can be more obvious and come into surface, and sometimes this fiber will go deep and it will not be seen. And sometimes when we study history in the Bible, we see certain processes or certain fibers, they surface in one place and 5,000 years later in a different place. But we can see that it is the same thing. One of very interesting example is described in Book of Esther. Well, before we go to the Book of Esther, let us see in Book of Samuel, when it was told to Shaul, king of Israel, first king of Israel. In Book of Samuel 15:3, it was told, God tells, now go and smite Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have and spare them not, but slay both men and women, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. Well, God knows something why God tells to completely destroy Amalek. There is a good reason for it. And Shaul did not do it completely. At least he allowed the king of Amalek to live, most probably somebody else. As a result, Amalek escapes from destruction, which God appointed for him. And we see how that fiber resurfaces later. So when we see what is done. Yes, Shaul had to kill Amalek, and Shaul did not kill Amalek. What happened? Many centuries later, many hundred years later, in Book of Esther, which is already time of Persian kingdom, we read Esther 3:1. After these things, King Ahasuerus promotes Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Haggagite, and advanced him, and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. Well, Haggagite, it's very important that it is mentioned, because Haggag was the king of Amalek. It is actually a throne name of Amalekite kings, just like Pharaoh was a throne name in Egypt, and Caesarus became a throne name in Roman Empire after Caius Julius Caesarus. So Haggag was a name of all Amalekite kings. And even the king which was spared, left to live by Shaul, was also named Haggag in Bible. And Haggagite, so Haman, the prime minister of Persian emperor, is descendant of Haggag. He is Amalekite. He is descendant of Haggag, who escaped from Shaul. And now he conceives a plan to exterminate Israel. Well, previously Israel had to exterminate Amalek. Now Amalek wants to exterminate Israel. But who stands in his way? That is even more interesting. Who stands in his way? The Mordecai. Who is Mordecai? In Esther 2:5 we read, a man, a Jew, there has been in Shushan the palace, and his name Mordecai, son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamite. And these last two names, son of Kish and Benjamite, are most interesting, because Bible clearly tells us, do you remember whose son was Shaul? Shaul was son of Kish, a Benjamite. His father's name was Kish, and Benjamin is the ancestor, the head of the tribe. So, and Mordecai is also Benjamin, and he is son of Kish. So he is from the same clan, of the same family. That's why its name mentioned. Well, in historical books, is also when somebody's ancestry is described, they tell about name of the guy and his father, and then they mentioned the famous person from his ancestor, so that he will understand from which line he goes. And the famous person is Kish and Benjamin. And it's obvious why Kish is famous, because Kish was the father of the first king. That's why he's famous. But there is more to that. If we read the Talmud, in Targum Sheni, there is a genealogy of Mordecai. And in genealogy of Mordecai, and that is a historical document which states that Mordecai is descendant of Jonathan. Do you remember that one of sons of Jonathan was a constant guest at the court of David? David wanted to do something good for Jonathan, his friend, and Jonathan died, but he had a son. So that son's descendant is Mordecai. He comes from the line of Jonathan, son of Shaul. So what is interesting here, that Mordecai puts an end to Haman the Haggagite. It's kind of Shaul in 11th century BC didn't exterminate Haggag and Amalek completely. That's why in 5th or 4th century, like around 400 years, no, it's 5th century BC. In 5th century BC, his descendant exterminates the same line of Amalek and Haggag. It's the same conflict lasts for more than 5,000 years, because Shaul did not do it in time. But it is completed, but his descendant against descendant of the enemy. That's how those confrontations in Bible often take place. And we'll see it in the book Revelation also. Conflict which was happening in past time, it will happen again. It happens again now, and it will happen again in the future, because if we did not succeed previously, we will succeed in the future. God still leads us to victory, and the victory is done by kind of the same generation, but it will change the generation, meaning the people who do it. Do you remember how God describes return of Jesus from Egypt? That's another good example, because it's in Matthew 2:15, for example, that when Joseph with Mary and with Jesus are called back from Egypt, he tells, out of Egypt I did call my son. But previously the same phrase was taught about Israeli nation in general. So it's kind of the same process, and it is described for Israeli nation, which comes out of Egypt, and for Jesus, which is returning out from Egypt also to the same land. We often tell about double prophecy, and we can even see not only double but triple, quadruple prophecy, when the same prophecy happens many times in Bible in different forms. And that's why it happens. It is because it's not just repeating, it's not cycles like in Hinduism, but it is one process which goes through time. It is the same process, it doesn't change. That's why Bible even sometimes names one person with the name of another person who lived long before. If the mission is the same, if the process is the same. Good example, Elijah. Do you remember when it was taught in Bible that Elijah the prophet must come before coming of Messiah? And even disciples, they were asking Jesus, Elijah must come before Messiah. And what Jesus tells them, I say unto you, it's Matthew 17:12. I say unto you, Elijah is come already, and they knew him not. And it's written that they understand that it is taught about John the Baptist. About John the Baptist. So why John the Baptist is named Elijah? Because the same mission. Elijah has the same mission, and that's why Bible sees them as a continuation of the same power. It's kind of the same power. In this case, it's God's power through human. It can be one human, another human, but it is the same person prophetically. So the process of destruction of Jerusalem in many places is a symbol of destruction of this world of sin. In Matthew 24, disciples, and we know it very well, yes, disciples come to Jesus, and as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, it's Matthew 24, I read, verse 3, as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately saying, tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world? And what these things shall be is about destruction of the temple, because before he told them the temple will be destroyed. And they ask about them together. And Jesus even does not argue about it, that these are different events. No, because from biblical concepts, but from God's perspective, these are parts of the same process. The destruction of Jerusalem, which is a sin, is the same as destruction of this world, which is in sin. And he tells them, when yes, therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, then let them which be in Judea flee unto the mountains. Well, we know that fleeing to mountains from Jerusalem it did happen in year 70 AD when Romans surrounded Jerusalem. And then to some period of time, they left Jerusalem, allowing Christians to flee. But we understand that it is a symbol also of what is happening in the last time. And Jesus tells about those processes as parts of the same thing happening just across history, here and there. Biblical eschatological processes, they pierce the flow of time. The same is about destruction of Jerusalem, which was happening before. In year 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, destroyed Jerusalem. And the vision of the destruction of Jerusalem was given to prophet Ezekiel. Ezekiel in chapter 9 describes what he sees, verses 4 and 5. And the Lord said unto him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. And to the others he said in my hearing, go ye after him through the city and smite. Let not your eyes spare, neither have ye pity. Well, we see marks put on foreheads of God's people, so sealing God's people, and then disasters come to everybody else. Do we see it in Book of Revelation for end times? Definitely. Book of Revelation 7, in verse 3, we see how angels speak, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. The same process, sealing God's servants in their foreheads, and after that will come the destruction. So destruction of Jerusalem, which happened more than 2,500 years ago, like 2,600 years ago, roughly it was, and destruction of this world of sin. There are such parallels. We can tell it's double prophecy, but we must see that it is because the history doesn't just repeat itself. The history grows through time. It is like one solid thing. And we just see those fibers resurfacing in one place, in another place. There is internal connection. Secret of lawlessness, which is mentioned by Apostle Paul in 2 Thessalonians in chapter 2. Let us read 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 7 to 9. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming, whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders. So this guy who is wicked and who comes with works of Satan, with wonders, lying wonders and power and sign, it's definitely the one which is described in book of Daniel and in book of Revelation, that false prophets and false religious system of the old time. But Paul tells, mystery of iniquity does already work, but it's just not let to develop now, but then the holding power will be taken away and it will manifest. So 2,000 years ago, it also existed. It's not something new. It is the same system, the same power. It existed, and if we tell that usually that Babylon, it is papacy, we see here that it existed even before papacy. Papacy is just inheriting it. It grows from deeper past of history. And that's what we see in a different place when the beast is described. And when the beast is described in Revelation 17, it is taught about the beast, 17:8. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of bottomless pit. What does the phrase mean? It was and it is not, and it shall ascend. Exactly what I was telling. That manifestation of some fibers of that of some process in time. It was visible in past time, then it goes deep. It can be not visible for a long time, and then it will come to the surface again. That's what happened to Babylon actually previously already, because there was a, and historians know it very well, and those who study ancient history, there was an ancient Babylonian kingdom which was around 15th century BC. Then it is not visible for a very long time, and then there comes a new Babylonian kingdom, which is in times of Nebuchadnezzar when Jerusalem was destroyed, 7th and 6th century BC. So the same power, it kind of disappears, but it doesn't disappear completely. It is just not visible, but then it comes again to the surface. And then it comes to Rome, and we see that Rome also manifests as a powerful empire. Then it comes to oblivion for a very long period of time. And then it comes again manifesting stronger, and we'll see it in later time. And again, it shouldn't be the same geographic location. If we understand that it is power led by Satan, we understand that the Satan chooses different instruments for the same process. That's why we see in Revelation chapter 13, when the beast is shown, when it comes out from the sea, it is shown with attributes of several animals, right? It's Revelation 13:1. I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads name of blasphemy. And I apologize, I will have to open probably this verse to see that attributes of the beast. And the beast which I read the Revelation 13:2, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of bear, and his mouth as the mouth of lion, and the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. So we see that the leopard and bear and lion, and these are exactly the same animals which were in Book of Daniel. Why? Because the beast is inheriting their mission and the same process and the same power. It is kind of the same thing, which just changes. It takes a different form throughout history, but it's the same power. That's why it has 7 heads also, because if we count heads which were in Book of Daniel, where there was what? There was a lion, there was bear, and the leopard there had 4 heads, yes, and 4 heads, and there was that another strange and dangerous beast animal, and all together we see those 7 heads. And here this beast also has 7 heads. So there's definitely connection between them. So when we study in Book of Revelation the powers which act in history, because they are led by humans, we shouldn't be confused by the fact that people come and go because people die, and human organizations and countries continuously change. They change on the surface. Inside, under the surface, they have connection to each other, and we must be able to see the same process, even if it is named by different names, because 1,000 years passed and it's located geographically in different locations, possibly speaks in different languages, but it is the same process. That's how Bible shows it. One of the most discussed thing in Bible is a thing which is favorite even among non-believers, that number 666. But did we see that it's actually in Book of Daniel? Because the beast is described, and it is told that let him it is Revelation 13:18. Here is wisdom. Let him that has understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of man, and his number 666. Now, if we understand that there is nothing new, yes, just like Solomon was describing, so we must see where it was in Bible and other places. And if we open book of Daniel, chapter 3, verse 1, and if we open not modern translations, which changed the measure units there and the numbers disappeared. But if we open either King James translation or original Hebrew language to see which numbers are there, it is told that Nebuchadnezzar, the king, when he was making the idol for a common worship system for whole his empire, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. So we see that it is, and then he calls everybody in his empire to worship that idol. But we see that the dimensions of the idol is 60 and height is 60 and the base is 6 by 6. When it's told breadth thereof 6 cubits, but it's clear it's 6 by 6. So we see this 666 again here in Daniel. So when it is mentioned in the book of Revelation, it's definitely a connection to that cult of Babylon, which is already in Bible in Daniel.